I feel like I try to live those values. So as a candidate, I can talk about it, but as a person who is in my community and serving my community, I try to live those values.
Welcome. It's amazing to have you here. So, this is our second virtual installment of Pizza and Politics. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, there's no pizza here today, but
Yeah,
I
that's
wanted
great.
to start off and ask, how do you feel about pineapple pizza?
Oh, I don't like pineapple. I love pineapple. I've eaten pineapple today of all things, but pineapple and pizza, sorry. I know. What can I say? My son loves it. I don't. Although I will say I like buffalo. I do like buffalo.
To start off, can you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what inspired you to run for Congress?
I'm Tedra Cobb, and I did run for Congress in New York in the 21st Congressional District, which, if you're looking at a map from New York, it's north of Syracuse, north of Albany, and the Adirondacks. So it's sort of like that top triangle of New York State. We call it Northern New York. Most of us call it Northern New York. And I ran for Congress mostly because of healthcare. My daughter, when she was 16, lost the ability to walk and to stand, and she was diagnosed with something called degenerative disc disease. And she needed to have emergency back surgery. And we were lucky because I had insurance through my job. So my daughter, Ada, got the surgery that she needed. A month after her surgery, I lost my job and we lost our insurance. So in 2017, Elise Stefanik, the person that I challenged, voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act and to kick 64,000 people in this district off their health care and to strip away protections for people with pre-existing conditions like my daughter Ada. So I decided it was time for me to run. My background is in healthcare. I've done a lot of work in healthcare. I've been elected before I was a county legislator, and I just felt it was time for me to run and to represent people like my own family.
What, in your opinion, is the biggest misconception about how politics works in general?
Well, I think that people don't realize how hard elected people work. In other words, we have a culture in the United States where we like to say things like, they're just a politician. People would say that to me sometimes. Well, you're just going to be a politician. I think certainly there are some people who are in politics for selfish reasons or self-aggrandizement, and to lift themselves up. But I actually think the vast majority of people do want to be public servants and are quiet. They're not the ones on Twitter all the time. They're not the ones on the front page of the newspaper all the time, but they're often the ones who are working behind the scenes quietly on things like climate and healthcare and good government.
So, you kind of touched upon this a little bit, but what are some of the most important or valuable policies that your campaign prioritized and how?
Well, first and foremost, healthcare. Healthcare touches all of us. And so when I think about healthcare, I think about all of the burdens that people carry in terms of caring for family members. But also, I think about drug and alcohol or substance abuse disorder. In my own family, I have a brother who's recovering from substance abuse disorder. I have family members who have struggled with mental illness. So I think when I think of healthcare, I think about access to healthcare and how important it is because it touches all of our lives on so many levels. Some of the things we talked about, Social Security, Medicare. I mean, think about your grandparents. You're a lot younger than me. You're younger than my children, but think about your grandparents who have worked and who have retired and who rely on Social Security and Medicare. And in fact, they've paid into it so that they would have it in their senior years and they could retire with dignity. I worry about the future of those programs, especially for you, so that it will be there for you. We have to prioritize that. And lastly, of course, the environment is crucially important. And you might not know this, but I actually have had solar panels on my house since 1993. And I have a plug-in electric and I have a full electric vehicle. And today I just did a senior citizen. I do meal deliveries on Mondays and Fridays, and I'm able to do the whole meal delivery in my electric car and not use any gas. So I feel like I try to live those values. So as a candidate, I can talk about it, but as a person who is in my community and serving my community, I try to live those values. There are lots of other issues too, of course, education and childcare, but I don't want to throw too many things at you.
So recently, as you know, there's been a focus on race-based injustices and violation of rights. So if you were elected, how would you have begun the process of protecting the rights of Indigenous peoples and other people of color?
So I think the first and most important thing is to understand systemic racism. We talk about it in a theoretical, but what does that mean? Well, it means that at the last I read, Black and brown people are 3 times more likely to be exposed to COVID and 3 times more likely to die of COVID. So that's something we can sort of understand immediately. Black women are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth. Children growing up in minority communities are 5 times more likely to have asthma or lead poisoning. So for me, it is to understand what another community, whether it's a minority community where I live, whether it's Akwesasne, because there's a Akwesasne reservation here in my community, to understand what it is that community might face and how to be an advocate and understand and a partner in making the change that needs to happen. So I started by answering your question by saying, we need to understand the impact of the environmental injustice or healthcare injustice or policing injustice, and then how to solve that problem. So for me, it's listening, and then it's working together to solve those problems. And that means not elevating my voice, but elevating others' voices so that they have an equal seat at the table, because I think fundamentally that is the injustice, that we don't have an equal seat at the table.
What advice would you give young people who are perhaps interested in politics or passionate about a social justice issue?
Well, first and foremost, I'd say if you're passionate about a thing, then find the group of people that you might align with. And first and foremost, volunteer. So I know a lot of people have volunteered. I had a couple hundred between the interns and my fellows, students work on my campaign, young people, your age, high schoolers, college students. I'm not hierarchical, like just call me Tedra. You don't need to call me Ms. I believe that everybody brings something to the table and we are equal. And so first and foremost, if you are a Democrat or a Republican, I know you have a bipartisan group here, then join your local party. Be part of something locally and get to know people and volunteer and make yourself useful, as my dad used to say to me, which usually meant do a chore, but in some ways it is that, right? It's participating and getting the people in your community to know who you are and getting to know them. So whatever the issue is, for me, I've worked on lots of boards. I've been on a domestic violence board. I've been on healthcare boards. I've worked for marriage equality. Those were all things over the last 30 years that I worked on with other people in my community because they were important to me and to my family. And that's what I would suggest to start with. And then I would always say, run for something, run for local office, run for school board. When I ran the first time, people were very skeptical, and I just knocked on lots of doors, talked to lots of people, and I won that race. And I think that we have to run in order to win, in order to make the change we want to make.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with us. Why do you think students should take their time out of their busy schedules to learn about government?
Because it's your future. I know you're probably told that over and over again, but the reality is this. like I said, I'm in my 50s. I have children that are a little older than you, and they teach me. Let me put it that way. They push me forward. They challenge how I think. If you don't get involved, then what we do as adults is we find common ground with each other. We go to where we're comfortable, and we need to be challenged by you to push us to do the right thing for your future. And if you don't use your voices, I sound like a mom, use your voice, but if you don't, if you don't speak up, if you don't fight, if you don't come to meetings, if you don't participate, then we don't really know. We can assume what you want, or we can ignore what you want. So it really means that you have to step up. If you vote, the future will be very different than what we see right now, because demographics change, and your generation actually is very different than people who are your priorities are very different than folks in their 60s, 70s, 80s. Climate change, I think, in your generation is like the number one issue. It's not the number one issue for older people. I just want to make sure that I'm kind of clear in what I'm saying without sounding condescending. I think sometimes older people can be very condescending and say, well, you didn't vote, so you don't care. I think that's really condescending. And I don't ever want, as a person who's run for office, to ever be condescending. People have reasons why they vote and why they don't. My goal is to get people to become involved and to vote, and not to disenfranchise people, but to rather give them the power and the courage and the energy to become involved.